Hello and welcome to another edition of Meet the Manager, where we gain an insight into the strategies of managers with an excellent track record of success in Fantasy Premier League. Today I'm joined by Mark, aka FPL General. Now Mark has had an incredible 3 top 500 finishes in his last 4 seasons, but arguably faces his toughest test yet as he deals with 2018-19 season and its troubles. He's currently placed just outside the top 400,000 and is still recovering from a disastrous game week 13 that saw him double his overall rank. Mark, in spite of recent game weeks, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, Joe. Had a nice weekend away from FPL. I just needed to take a break after the painful game week 13. So I think I'm going to do that more often. Just forget about the games and just log in on Sunday nights, and that seems to work better for me. So thanks very much for inviting me on to this. Before we start, I just want to say well done for putting this together this season. It's, in my opinion, by far and away the best FPL content out there this year.
Okay, wow.
It's been brilliant to get an insight into the best managers in the world out there. So well done for that.
Excellent. No, well, thank you for the compliment, and it's good to have managers like yourself on. And if we can look at your career history, we've got it up on the screen here, and we can see why we've got you on here. Last season 362. I mean, I've got into the top 1,000 once. It's tricky. I've never got into the top 500, and then the season before that 102,000, and then 352. Sorry, 102, and then 352. Wow. So that's a really consistent run there. Looking at that, and perhaps in comparison to some of the other managers I've spoken to who've perhaps got much more consistent run of say 9, 10 top 1,000 finishes, you've got this very recent consistent run of very high finishes, and these are the types of finishes where if certain decisions and certain aspects of the game had gone in a particular way, you could have ended up challenging for the number one spot as well. So you're right up there amongst the very highest rankings as well. So I think the key question to ask you is, what do you think it takes to get to that really top level, to that top 500 finish out of 5.5 million people, as opposed to say a good finish in the top 10,000?
Yeah, I've just noted down a couple of things here. There's probably a combination of things that I've found that have got me the top 500.
Oh, your sound has just gone. Your sound has gone. No. No. Oh, almost.
You got me now?
Yes, I've got you now. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, this microphone has a mind of its own, so it should be okay now, I think.
Okay, right. So basically I was asking what it takes to get into that top thing. So you said you noted down a couple of things. So just pretend I've just asked that question again.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that there's probably a combination of things that have got me into the top 500 a couple of times. I've just noted a few of them down here. I think, first of all, I think a good start is very helpful. I don't think it's essential to have a good start, but I tended to have a very good start in those seasons where I finished highly. And this season, I didn't start as well as previous seasons. I think I was about 1.1 million after 4 game weeks this season, so it was always going to be a struggle this season. So a good start, I think, number one. Something else I've been pretty good at over the years is nailing transfers and nailing captaincy as well. I think those are 2 big ones. Last season in particular, almost every transfer I made worked out pretty well for me, and that's something I've been struggling with this season. I've made a couple of dodgy transfer decisions that have really stung me, and that's something I'm trying to work on. For the rest of the season, is to try to nail those transfers.
Is there an example you can give in some of those 3 exceptionally high finishing seasons where you've nailed that transfer? And I'm guessing that's something along the lines of getting a player in before everyone else gets them.
Yeah, I think that's the key, and I'll talk about eye test later on. But I think with the eye test, for me, it's always been number one, and I think that's where you can get ahead of the game. You can see signs of where a player is going to hit a bit of form. And yeah, as I say, last season, I'm trying to think of any examples in particular. The game week 38 one is the one that stands out most of all, because I did Harry Maguire out for PVA. So I got rid of a 0-pointer and got in an 18-pointer, and that's what got me into the top 500 last season. But going back, earlier in the season, as I said, look, I remember at the end of the season reviewing how things went last season, and one of the things I found was, 80-90% of the transfers I made, the players that I brought in went on to perform well over the next few weeks, and that was a big one for me. Captaincy as well, going back to captaincy, I think captaincy is huge. Captaincy is actually something I don't really like about FPL. It probably doesn't suit players like me. It probably adds a bit more luck to the game. But if you can nail your captaincy more often than not, you're in for a good finish. And we see a lot of people this season. We're 14 game weeks in now, and a lot of people have got captaincy returns every single game week. So those managers are doing very well. There's been probably 2 or 3 game weeks where captaincy has let me down, and that always hurts.
So, for example, last season as well, we were blessed with having Mo Salah. Was Mo Salah your kind of default captain, or did you stray successfully? Because I know, for example, some people through the season strayed on to Harry Kane last, and that didn't go so well in comparison because Salah kept getting the good returns, and Kane really didn't perform as well as a FPL asset as he should have done there. So what happened there? Salah for the captain?
Yeah, Salah was a big factor in my success last season. I think I got him in on wildcard game week 10, and I kept him the whole way through. Then he was my default captain, the majority of game weeks. I was pretty loyal to him. I'm like that with players in the FPL. If they do a job for me, I tend to stay loyal to them. So Salah kept the armband for the majority of last season, and that played a big part. I'm just going to touch on 1 or 2 more points on how you said how to get a really good finish as opposed to just a good finish. One thing I think you need to, if you want to win FPL out altogether, number one, or get a top 100, I think you've got to be brave in certain situations, and you've got to be different. It's very easy. I think one of the biggest challenges nowadays for us managers is how we manage the information, because there's so much information out there, and it's so easy to just follow the crowd, and you can almost just do it subconsciously. Managing the information, but more importantly, how you manage yourself, I think, is the most important. And sticking to your own guns. And it can be very hard nowadays to make a decision that is different from the crowd. And I think that's one of the keys. If you want to win it outright, you've got to take a chance here and there, especially maybe towards the end of the season. If you're in the top 10,000, it might be your only ever chance to have a go at top 500, top 100, or winning it outright. So you probably got to think outside the box in certain situations and be brave. So that's why I put down.
What happens though if the player that you've looked at with the eye test and it happens to be the player everyone else is getting in as well? Would you in that situation try and ignore that player and get in a differential that you think can outperform that particular player? Or do you go with? That's what I'm kind of getting at. Really, is kind of helping people kind of disseminate through all of that noise and think, well, hang on, is this player? Are people getting him in because he's good, or are they getting him in because everyone else is?
Yeah, that's the hard part. And I think there's a question coming up about ownership in a wee while and differentials and things like that. It's there's always a lot of talk about the template and differentials and player ownership and something like that, but over the seasons, player ownership is something I've rarely looked at. Likewise, team value as well. Probably 2 things I look at, maybe less so than other managers. And I always just try and it's tunnel vision, looking at my own side and trying to ignore the external factors. So trying to ignore who everyone else is getting in, because at the end of the day, I don't really care who everyone else is getting in. I want to get the decision right for my side. And again, with all the information out there and social media, that is one of the biggest challenges nowadays. So if I'm down the rankings now 400k, so people are asking me, are you going to start looking for differentials? But I don't really look at player ownership. I just focus on bringing in the players that I think are going to get me the most points. And I think people can forget about that sometimes. You can get tied up in overall rank and player ownership, but at the end of the day, the most important thing for me is getting in the players that I feel are going to get me the most points over the next few weeks.
Okay, another element of strategy as well, hits as well. I noticed this season you've only taken 1 hit. Just people always say, what is that hit strategy? Some people can be successful taking lots. Is this normal for you? You taking like just 1 every 10, 15 game weeks?
Yeah, so avoiding points hits has always been a big part of my strategy. So going back to those top 500 seasons, I don't have data for 14, 15 and 15, 16, but I do know that I made roughly 40 transfers in those 2 seasons. And then I joined Twitter in 2016, 17, and there was just the overload of information, and I kind of opened myself up to new ideas, and I probably swayed away from my usual strategy, and I made 54 transfers that season. So that was a minus 76 in total, I think it was, in hits. And then I finished 41k. So I slipped, my ranking slipped in that season. So it was very easy for me then last season to go back to my tried and trusted strategy of avoiding points hits where necessary. And I only took 4 points hits in total last season. So minus 16. So that was a big difference from the previous season. I think last season was the least number of transfers I ever made, which was 38. So an average of one transfer a week over the course of last season. And the way I look at it is, I look at every transfer as precious, and I try to minimize transfers through good squad management. That's kind of the way I look at the game. So when I'm bringing in a player, I want to bring in a player that I feel that I may be able to keep long term. And that's probably where I've fallen down a little bit this season. I fell into the Barkley trap. I got in the likes of Knockhart. I went for Walcott as well. That's 3 examples this season where it probably doesn't fit in with my strategy of previous campaigns, and those 3 have hurt me.
Well, where do you stand on the strategy of playing by price points? As this is something that I've been doing, and I think sometimes it's been to my advantage and sometimes it's really hampered me. So for example, some of the players that you've listed there would indicate that you do go for a price point, and by that I mean, for those that aren't aware of that, so you've got you go for maybe 1 or 2 premium strikers. So when you have a premium striker that's not performing, you ship them out for another premium striker. You've got a 4th midfielder that's somewhere around the 6 million mark, and you'll get another 6 million mark, rather than shifting money elsewhere and getting maybe an extra expensive midfield there, or 2 dirt cheap ones. Where do you stand on that? Because it sounds like the names you mentioned, Knockhart and Barkley, these are very similarly priced players. Walcott as well.
Yeah, I know a lot of managers do that. You often see in pre-season, you'll see a manager putting up a picture, but there's no players on the picture. It's just price points. It's structure, team structure with the prices. It's something I've never done. I don't really, I don't really think of it that way. And usually I just try and, one thing I've always been with each season is, I've been flexible. So, you can't have a set, people often ask, about formation, what's the best formation? I think more so than ever now, it's not a question anymore. You got to move with the seasons, and you got to move with the game weeks, and you got to, move where the value is at certain points of the season. So I always, I don't really think of it as price points. I'm always just looking for value in a player. And my formation changes, from time to time, and just depends where the value is at that given point. I've got a structure at the moment. I've got Aguero, so I've got the 1 premium striker and the 2 budget strikers, and that's the way it's been, for the most part this season. But I've started to take money out of defence in recent weeks. But again, it's not really something that's in the back of my mind, the price point thing. I just kind of move with the game weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed this season, so for example, you've played 3-4-3 the most often. That's quite common for kind of, I suppose, veteran managers like ourselves have been playing. It's a tried and tested one. There's always value with a budget striker or 2. But actually 4-4-2 has been your most successful, but you have deployed that 4 times as well. So often, I mean, that's been quite similar to me, and I would imagine a lot of other managers, because you see that flexibility there. If you've got 4, because this season with the likes of Wan-Bissaka and Doherty, we've got those cheap defenders that are actually very good to play in certain game weeks. They're actually better than a midfielder or a striker. So is that what you're talking about there, about that flexibility, and particularly 4-4-2, 3-4-3 being a kind of key area there?
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of the 3-4-3, but again, it's about flexibility and moving with the times. And this season there's been such great defensive options, so we've kind of had to look at 4 at the back. Some people have even played 5 at the back very successfully at times this season. You said I played 4-4-2 4 times this season, and probably a few of those occasions was because of auto subs, because of other rotation. Maybe the likes of Wan-Bissaka and Doherty and those kind of players are coming in off our benches. But it's just because they offer such great value. The likes of Doherty especially this season, I was pretty late getting on him. I only got him 2 weeks ago. But just the way Wolves play with the three centre backs, and he just bounces forward from wing back. Really, I don't even look at it as a defender. He's more of a midfielder who gets clean sheet points. We've got quite a few players like that. Alonso and the likes of Mendy and those guys. We've basically got extra midfielders that we can play in defence.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly. I think that's been a change over the last 2 or 3 seasons. Really, is thinking of those defenders as midfielders, really good value midfielders. And on one of our recent videos, I think it was David was talking about getting Alonso out. And I know Alonso, we happen to have not had a good game week this week. But in general, I don't look at Alonso as a defender at all. I just think he's a 7 million or so midfielder who every other week is going to get me somewhere between 6 and 10 points. Sometimes he'll get 1 or 2. And I think if he was a midfielder, there's no way I would dump him.
Yeah.
So is that something that's happened? I mean that I suppose that's coincided with your recent good scores as well. Those kind of their wing backs and those types of things. Has that been something you've noticed as well over the last few seasons?
Yeah, definitely. It's been a change. There's been a change, over the seasons. With football changing, FPL change, the FPL landscape changes as well, and you've just kind of got to move with that. And that's the whole key to flexibility and being adaptable and being able to change your approach. Those couple of top 500 seasons that I had, every season was different. Especially the Leicester winning season. A lot of the big hitters weren't firing. It was all about the budget players that season. So you've got to be able to adjust your strategies and be adaptable. But yeah, back to the Alonso thing again. Alonso's always if someone owns Alonso and they want to make an upgrade in attack or in midfield, Alonso's often the make weight in those decisions. But I just never consider it because, as you say, I just don't think of him as a defender. I just think of him as a midfielder who can get me attacking points, and he also gets me clean sheets as well. And it's very easy to forget that, I think, because of his price. You just think, right, he's the most expensive defender, so maybe I don't need him. But when you compare him to the 6.57 midfielders, he's better. So he's just a hole for me.
You mentioned about patience and about it's not so rewarding if a player is getting you consistent returns. Say for example, Alonso does as well. You can't see any reason to get rid of them as well. But one thing I know that you do on your podcast, you have a regular watch list feature, and you use the watch list feature on the FPL website, and you're looking at players to get in. So just run through your thinking about your watch list. What criteria is it that is deserving of a watch list place? And by the same token, what criteria is it that you drop players off that list?
Yeah, so the watch list feature is something I find very useful. And, I don't think a lot of people use it, interacting with people on social media. I was surprised by how little people actually use it on the website. It's something I've always used during my successful seasons. And the way I do it is after every game week is finished, once I've watched whatever games I'm going to watch, and once I've watched Match of the Day, what I do then is I go through each of the 20 teams on the FPL website, and I'll add the players to my watch list who I feel have a chance of coming into my side, in the near future. And then once I've done that, I jump into the watch list itself, and I'll sort it by round score, and I'll check if there's any players I want to remove from the watch list. So that'll be maybe players who didn't play well, who are off form for a couple of weeks, players who maybe have picked up an injury, or just players that I'm no longer interested in. And the way I do it, I've got a bit of OCD, so I like to keep it at 30 players. So I always have 30 players on my watch list. I don't ever have goalkeepers because it's a position I rarely change. So it's defenders, midfielders, and strikers, and it gets updated every week. And the best thing I find about it is when it comes to a Friday night, which is when I tend to make my transfers. That goes back to patience as well. I always wait until Friday. I don't worry about price changes. But the watch list, when it comes to making a transfer on a Friday, then I don't have to go scrolling through all the teams looking for players. I've got all the players I'm interested in one place, and it's just a time saver as well as anything else. And the other thing I find about the watch list as well, when I have just the players that I'm interested in one place, it probably stops me from maybe going away from my plans and becoming interested in other players. So it's just something I've always used, and I find it very, very useful.
Okay. I mean, you mentioned the importance of the eye test there, and so you're looking at all of the different matches that have taken place, who should stay on the watch list, who should be off the watch list. You also mentioned that ownership really isn't a criteria, so you're not looking at the end of those weeks and go, well, hang on a minute, 200,000 people have got Harry Kane in. I must get him in, that type of thing as well. But in terms of underlying stats as well, because there's kind of two ways of looking at a game and in terms of gauging success. So you can look at, say, for example, the most recent game week, Eden Hazard came away with just an assist against really easy opposition in Fulham, but he did have 4 shots there, which coming back from injury could indicate something. So which stats do you look at, or do you not look at any stats?
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting. If I think back to my first 2 top 500 finishes, I didn't look at any stats in those seasons, and I think going right back again, as to how did I, first get those big finishes, and I moved to Abu Dhabi in 2013, and I was there for 2 years. And while I was working there, I had a lot of time to watch games, and I watched a lot more games than I ever did before. While I was living there, there was just a lot more. There was a great TV station there, beIN Sports, and they had almost every game. And even if I missed them, I would just record them and watch them back. And that's why the eye test, I feel, has always benefited me. I don't think I would have the top 500 finishes if I hadn't watched as many games as I had in those seasons. So the first 2 top 500 finishes, I didn't look at any stats. So I can see an argument where you don't really need to look at stats, and the eye test is enough. But I do like the combination of both. I signed up as a Fantasy Football Scout member for the first time last season, so this is my second season using it, and I do find it very useful to go alongside the eye test, especially things like the comparison tool. Compare if I'm between 2 players, likes of Kane and Aubameyang, for example. Now this week, I like that there. But in terms of stats, I don't look too much into the team stats. It's more individual player stats I'm looking at across the different positions. So, for example, strikers, the number 1 stat I look at is shots in the box. Then midfielders, I like looking again shots in the box and chances created, to assess assist potential. And defenders, one of the ones I look out for in defenders is touches in the final third. So again, you're kind of looking at how often they're getting forward and things like that. So again, there's people who don't look at any stats and they do as well as anybody. And then there's a lot of people maybe who don't watch a lot of football, but then they rely heavily on the stats. And again, you can do well that way, but I do like the combination of both. But I don't lean too heavily on the stats, because I think you can get in too deep to those as well, and they can cloud your judgment and things like that. So for me, It's always been eye test.
It's also the interpretation of them as well can differ wildly. So, for example, a player like Aubameyang, Lacazette, and Vardy in Leicester's season, pretty much every shot is a goal. And some people look at that and go, he's going to regress. And some people look at that and say, he's really accurate. And there's completely divergent views on that, and you'll come to different conclusions. I mean, just on that example, really, because we've got one at the moment, really, with Kane. Hell of a lot of shots. And 3 goals in the last 4 weeks. And then you've got Aubameyang, not so many shots, but also 3 goals as well. So where are you, I suppose, an optimist or a pessimist when it comes to kind of those promising underlying stats, or is the eye test still key?
Yeah, eye test is always number 1, but again, it's the Aubameyang and Kane one is a very interesting one this week. And I'm probably going to go Harry Kane, I think, but I think it's probably more down to, again, I'm pretty loyal to players who've served me well, and I've always, in those couple of seasons where I've, done really well, Kane was a big player in those as well. And again, back to your question, I'm probably more of a pessimist when it comes to players like Aubameyang. His stats, there's certain stats where he's every shot he takes is going in certain cases for the last couple of weeks. So I would expect him maybe to tail off a little bit, whereas maybe Kane, who's getting a lot of shots, maybe he's going to improve. So that's kind of the way I would look at it. But it's a very close call, and there's arguments to be made both ways. And I guess we need to take the price into account, which is probably the most important thing.
Okay, well that's a good way of coming into looking at your current team. So we're going to put your game week 14 team up, and so you're thinking about your moves in game week 15, and obviously Kane and Aubameyang is among them. So this was a better game week 14. Game week 13 wasn't so good. But overall, despite a poor start, game week 5 you wildcarded, and that proved quite successful. You had 4 green arrows in a row, and you were really moving up. So you were outside the top million, and you ploughed on up the rankings there. And then game week 13 kind of really set you back. You're back with a green arrow again. So In general, though, you've had more green arrows than red, and you're moving in the right direction as well. So, looking at your current side now, what players? This is looking at your eye test, your watch list, ignoring ownership and Twitter, looking at those kinds of issues. Who in your team are you looking to perhaps move on, and which players are you considering bringing in, and why?
Yeah, so one of the biggest problems I've had this season is not having enough Man City players. You know, the best team in the league who score the most goals. I've had Aguero all along, and he's been disappointing at times with when I've given the captaincy and things like that. You know, missing out at the weekend was very frustrating. One of my biggest regrets this season was my game week 8 transfers. Uh, One of them was selling David Silva, and the other was selling Callum Wilson. And then every week from then on, either one of them has hurt me almost every single week from then on. But the main issue with that was losing a Man City midfielder, and I just wish I held on to David Silva because my rank would be a lot different if I had done that. But so what I'm thinking now is, I need to get back in on the Man City midfield. So obviously Sterling is the man this season, and I've probably been too reluctant to get him in. So I may just bite the bullet this week and do it. So it would mean a sacrifice. Someone like Salah or Hazard has to go, which is not easy because the way I look at it, they've both got good fixtures coming up midweek as well. So that might put me off Man City midfielders for another week. But again, you've got to ask yourself the question then is, when am I going to bite the bullet and get a Man City midfielder? It just feels like it's been too long. So Aguero is probably going to go. His away form hasn't been great, and he's a slight injury doubt now as well. So I think it's a good week to do the Aguero to Kane move, or for those who like Aubameyang, it's a good time to do it with the doubts over Aguero. So that's what I'm thinking. It's Man City who've been hurting me, so I want to get in. The likes of Sterling, Sané, maybe even Silva. I've even looked at a possible triple up on the City midfield for the Christmas period.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at your. It's good that you mentioned Aguero there and moving him. So I was looking at your captaincy this season, and you've been pretty much exclusively Salah Aguero. So Salah's captained 7 times, averaging 16 points, and Aguero 4 times, averaging 14 points. When you've moved away from that, you've been most successful. Hazard got you 28 points. So that's the time you moved away from it. And looking at that, and looking, if we can look back on this season kind of already, one of the key big moves 3 or 4 weeks ago, those that got Sterling in, and more importantly, those that got Sterling in and decided to captain Sterling, have been the ones that have been shooting up the rankings. And the rest of us that have been sticking with Aguero and Salah, because, as you said, like Salah's averaging 16 points, at 8 points times 2, is good, and it's good enough to keep. But there's better players, and you've mentioned them there. Do you think you'll look back on this season and look at this period that we're looking at now and think that was the big game changer that you didn't get on, was those Man City mids and Sterling in particular, and also trusting them with the armband?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think FPL is a simple game which we overcomplicate, and I think when you just simplify it, who's the best team in the league and who scores the most goals? It's Man City. So why do I only have one of their players? That's the way I'm looking at it at the moment. And maybe a couple of weeks ago was the right time to bite the bullet maybe on Sterling or Hazard and get in. Salah or Hazard and get in Sterling. So again, I just don't want to waste too much more time. I mean, if I do Aguero to Kane this week, I always just seem to find a reason not to get a Man City midfielder, and a lot of it is always this rotation worry. Sterling and Sané have played a lot of games in the last week. Are they going to get rested midweek? And Hazard and Salah have good fixtures, so it's very hard to lose them. But I just think there has to come a point where I just bite the bullet and just get the likes of Sterling and Salah.
I mean, I must admit, yeah, almost exclusively everyone I've seen who has at some point dumped Hazard or Salah over in recent weeks for Sterling has done well, and I think they will continue to do well. So I think you're right there. I think that's a good change this season. Looking at the rest of your team as well. So at the back as well. So you mentioned Doherty there, Wan-Bissaka, Robertson, and Alonso. These are kind of Balbuenas. You've got that looks like you've really looked at fixtures there. You've got good fixtures. You've looked at, there's a lot of eye tests there. I can't see any obvious defender moves that you would want to make. Are you quite happy with that?
The defence is probably the one area that I'm quite content with at the moment, and I don't really see myself making any moves there, which is good because I can focus on, more exciting transfers in attack and midfield. Goalkeeper is something that's bugging me though. Patricio, I brought him in wild card game week 5, and he did really well over 3 or 4 game weeks. But since then, it's just been 2 points and 1 point. So that's an area I would like to address. I don't like playing him against Chelsea midweek, but I've got other areas I think that are of a higher priority at the moment than the goalkeeper. So I am looking, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, maybe to make a goalkeeper switch. Now, whether it's a straight swap for Patricio or maybe bringing in someone like Fabianski maybe to do a rotation is something I'm thinking about as well.
I mean, one of the things I noted there, kind of always looking for trends in a season. I know we're only at the game week 14 mark, but I think a real trend this season has been a lack of success of the 4.5 goalkeepers. In previous seasons, we've had really good success. In truth, a lot of it has been relying on Burnley.
Yeah.
Now, I've got Hennessy and Hart. I didn't expect Burnley to be so awful at the back, and Hart hasn't been at all. Hart's been good, but once again, there comes a point where you're conceding so many shots. It's just inevitable you're going to concede, no matter how many saves you're making, and he's making a lot there. And I think people are finding that with Patricio as well. He's not as reliable as previous 4.5 ones. Fabianski as well. He's clocking up the saves, but they're just conceding too many as well. And another player I've got that I like, Hennessy. He's great when Palace have a nice easy game, but when Palace have a hard game, well, that's game over for Hennessy. There isn't that Heaton or a Pope or a Foster of old this season. So are you tempted to just say, well, hang on a minute, Ederson is pretty good. He's I'll spend $1 million more and I'll get some good clean sheet points there. Same with Alisson as well. Are you tempted to kind of break the mold and go more expensive?
Yeah, it probably will be something I think about when the time comes to, when I have a chance to make a goalkeeper switch. I do still have faith maybe in the 4.5 to come good though. I don't like spending, too much on goalkeepers. And trying to fit in the likes of Kane and the City midfielders and everything else, I'm probably going to struggle to upgrade to the likes of Ederson or Lloris. Some people are looking at Lloris now, so I'm probably going to end up sticking with either a Patricio rotation with someone else or just maybe replacing him straight out with someone like Fabianski just to set and forget. But as you say, we were blessed for the last couple of seasons with Burnley. I had Nick Pope most of last season, and he played a big part in my success last season as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's it's where if people are willing to spend that extra money, it's a way of getting an advantage this season because it's one of the weaknesses of this season as well. Also looking at the rest of your team here, so obviously premium wise, you're looking much more the midfield. Man City in attack, you're looking more at the fixtures there. You've got Spurs and obviously Aubameyang's a player you're considering, but you're not potentially going for, but on the watch list, I presume. But what about some of these kind of cheap seats? The kind of so you've got Richarlison, Maddison, got Jimenez, Arnautovic. These types of kind of cheaper midfield strikers and midfielders. What's your general strategy of dealing with them? When do you know when to ditch them and which ones to bring in?
Yeah, well, Richarlison I feel could be a season keeper, even though he hasn't performed overly well in the last couple of weeks. He's got 2 good fixtures coming up now as well. And out of position playing up front, I think it's hard to ignore. Playing for a good side as well, I think that's the key there. Everton score plenty of goals, so you'd expect him to be heavily involved. Maddison broke my heart last week with his red card. It just summed up my game week. But it's very easy to do a raised transfer then and just ship him out because of his red card. But luckily, he served a suspension midweek, so I got him in a good fixture then against Watford, and then he got his goals. So patience paid off there. But he's probably someone I'll move on, I would imagine. Maybe not midweek, but probably the weekend. He's got tough fixtures coming up as well. Jimenez is just, I had Ings like yourself most of the season. I know Mark Hughes just got sacked today, so maybe that'll improve things for Ings in the next few weeks. But it was just an easy move from Ings to Jimenez because Jimenez has been offering so much value. And he doesn't need to do much for his price. If he's chipping in with a goal here and there, an assist here and there, he'll be good value. And Arnautovic, we know what Arnie can do. And going back to that disastrous game week 8 transfer that I made, it was mainly to get Arnautovic in. And then his injury troubles started, and he didn't perform, and he didn't show up in a few games. But I think Arnie will be fine as long as he can play the majority of games. I think he'll score well. So those players I'm happy enough with. Again, when do I decide to sell them? It's probably, if they go 3 or 4 weeks without anything, I'll start to think about, should they go? Looking ahead to their fixtures, do I see an upturn, or is it time to cut ties with them? So it's probably a combination of things.
Okay. I mean, elsewhere in your team as well, it looks like looking ahead to the festive fixtures as well. I mean, West Ham, Tottenham, Arsenal, Manchester United, amongst those with the best fixtures there as well. Just finally, no one ever really mentions Manchester United anymore. Martial was a player that you haven't got in. Does a player like Martial kind of tick your box? He certainly seems to pass the eye test, but is there a particular reason why he's quite an interesting player? He's quite a divisive player, so I just wondered, is there a particular reason why you haven't gone for him?
Probably because I'm a Man United fan and I can't stand watching them these
Oh,
days.
okay.
That's one of the main things. But no, it's in FPL terms, quite simply, I've just never trusted United attackers under Jose Mourinho. And that was probably one of the reasons I was never really interested in Martial when a lot of people were getting him. Yes, he passed the eye test, but again, he was overperforming. But again, the main reason is just Mourinho, really. And at any given game week, that one bad game, Mourinho's ruthless, and he can just ship Martial out again to the bench. We know he's had issues with Martial in the past, so it's probably external factors, maybe more so than FPL factors that swayed me away from Martial. But I don't think I've owned any United players this season, and again, it's they're not a top six team this season. They're pretty rubbish. You can't trust their defence
Okay.
either as well. So they're just not a good side at the moment, and that's why I'm not really interested in the players.
Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us, Mark. Just to recap, really looking at the eye test seems absolutely key, and I think one of the real takeaways is about the watch list as well. It's so simple, so easy to do, and so many people don't do it, and it just does help to kind of get some clarity in FPL managers' minds about the players that they're thinking of getting in and not as well. And it sounds like, I mean, as I said, even though your rank isn't what you want at the moment, it's been more green arrows than red since that wild card. Well, I mean, to say I'm going to invest in Man City midfielders, that is simply a strategy that I cannot see failing. So for now, Mark, good luck with the next game week and good luck with the rest of the season.
Cheers, Joel. Thanks for having me.